We're taking stock with Magda Wierzycka, the connected chief executive of Sygnia Asset Management. Corruption in South Africa, a big story, but it's not just about state corruption. There's been corporate complicity in that corruption process. And also there's been a whole lot of scandals around corporate which is now 6-7 months old and will take another 4 or 5 months to do.
Indeed. I think that the initial report is supposed to come out in December, but I think that's only going back to 2015. I think that what you will find in the recommendations is that all of these activities that Marcus Jooste undertook span, much earlier than 2015, so investigations will be ongoing. Look, the Steinhoff affair is so interesting on so many different levels because it actually doesn't touch the public sector in South Africa. It actually has nothing to do with the ANC or the public sector or government corruption. It actually is kind of a pimple on the face of business South Africa. And it involves some of the figures that, were held in complete reverence by asset managers, by the general public, people like Christo Wieses of this world. And the issue with Steinhoff, for me, was problematic from, numerous perspectives. But the first one was, we manage passive investments, so we invest in the same shares as are held in market indices. So we had some exposure to Steinhoff.
You would have had 4 or 5% of Steinhoff in your
It actually wasn't that much. I think it was about 1.6%. But still, nonetheless, we lost about 400 million for investors in the Steinhoff affair. But what was so interesting is obviously we don't analyze financials, but I've seen and I have worked on the active side. I have analyzed financials. So I picked up immediately that the rumor started spreading. I picked up the financials of Steinhoff just to dig into it and see what on earth is happening and what can I spot. And what was so amazing is that the financials of Steinhoff were a one-pager. There was absolutely no disclosure. They were just ginormous numbers, billions of pounds showing your revenue lines, your expense, but there was no breakdown, no divisional breakdowns, no geographical breakdowns, nothing. So I looked at those financials for about 10 minutes and I went, I actually cannot tell you what this company does. It's not in the numbers. I can't tell anything from the numbers. All I can tell you is the tax rate seems unusually low. So then you go back to the active asset management industry and you go, well, what were you guys doing? Because you certainly weren't analyzing that one page. So what is your analysis premised on? And then, I go back to my beginnings in asset management, and someone very wise that I used to work for said to me, the very first thing I was told when analyzing companies was management lies. So every management interview that you have as an analyst, approach it with the attitude of management lies. You need to see the numbers and analyze the numbers. And so you look at Steinhoff affair, and if you didn't have the numbers, the only reason you would invest in Steinhoff is because you believed in the cult of personalities. You believed in Christo Wiese. You believed in Marcus Jooste. And that's kind of, it obviously goes against any principle, basic, investment 101. But it's amazing how charismatic people can carry intelligent people along into a fraudulent situation.
Provided the growth is good, people buy into it. Now, you mentioned Christo Wiese a couple of times. Christo Wiese says he was duped. Christo Wiese, who sat on the board of Steinhoff for at least 2 years before investing heavily and becoming chairman of Steinhoff, says he was duped. He had the wool pulled over his eyes as well. You seem skeptical of that perspective.
Okay, so my view, it's a personal view, and I hope I don't get sued for this view. But my view is that he knew some of it, not all of it. So if you look at the whole Steinhoff affair and the bits and pieces that have come out subsequently, certainly they did a whole lot of dodgy tax structuring activities.
Dodgy tax structuring or aggressive tax structuring? Is there a difference? Is there a difference?
No, there isn't. So you can convince yourself that something isn't illegal because it's just clever. And I think that that is how people do what they do.
And you could get professional advice to confirm your view.
Look,
if you chose to.
you will get whatever advice you want to pay for, as we know with KPMG. So really, if you want to do something, you call in advisors and you say to them, this is what I want to do, tell me how. It's not an issue of them coming to you saying, we've got a fantastic new scheme. That's not how it happens. If I want to reduce my tax rate, what would I do? I would call in advisors like KPMG or PwC, the advisory arm, not the audit arm, and I would say to them, guys, I believe I'm paying too much tax. Present me with 5 different schemes that I could implement today to reduce my tax rate.
And they would go to tax law and they would distill through.
And they would structure things in Mauritius and in Jersey and suddenly, tax rate reduces significantly. And, my firm belief is, if you look at the Steinhoff structure and all these off-balance sheet entities where they moved things off-balance sheet, that stuff Christopher Wiese was aware of. But I think that he persuaded himself, as many people do, particularly when there's hubris involved, ego involved, and you've been successful for so many years, that he was just being clever.
I've spoken to him about this and said, have you ever broken tax law? He says, no, he's not broken tax law, but he's had disagreements with SARS, and sometimes he wins them, and sometimes SARS wins.
Loses.
They go into, it's kind of like a battle, I suppose.
Exactly. And you know what? I pay all my taxes. I don't have any tax structuring. I don't have anything outside of the borders of South Africa, and I sleep at night. And I wouldn't sleep at night if I had some trusts in Mauritius, if I had some offshore structures. You know what? I'm a firm believer in I pay my taxes. Many people in business don't. And that's what why do you have disputes with SARS? Well, only because you haven't paid what you were due to pay.
And that brings into play, you were the first chief executive to fire KPMG. You went to go and see them, you asked them some questions, you weren't happy with the answers that they gave
well, they
you.
Lied.
And you, yes, they lied. And you publicly sacked them, and that said about something like 20 other high-profile sackings of KPMG. It's denuded KPMG of many of its people, it's lost a lot of its customers. But there was that, there was McKinsey, there was SAP, big names in South Africa, big multinational names. We've seen the apology come from McKinsey. We're sorry, I think it was a 15.
We're sorry, but not really.
We're sorry, but we want to carry on doing business and we don't think we did anything wrong.
Exactly.
KPMG, we're very sorry, but we carry on to do business. Please don't fire us, anybody else. SAP, have they got away too lightly?
I think all of them have gotten away too lightly. Look, I think this is what I find the most shocking of it all. Because look, in the South African context, when ANC came into power and you had a whole lot of people who for many, many years had access to nothing, suddenly were in positions where they could bend tenders their way and benefit. When you come from nothing, I think it's easier. I'm not saying it's excusable in any way, but, given the history of this country, I can make some allowances. When you look at these large corporates, their view of emerging markets is that the way you do business in emerging markets, and South Africa specific, is you pay bribes. That's how you do business. That is an acceptable way of doing business.
You're using a vulgar word, though. Nobody would ever bribe. They might pay an incentive. They might pay a commission or a benefit.
Rebates, middlemen. Please, call it whatever you want to. It's a bribe. And they know it's a bribe. And so these multinationals come into emerging markets and they exploit people. They exploit people's weaknesses, they exploit poverty in those countries for their own financial benefit. And that I find completely inexcusable. So, if you look at something like KPMG, why did they do what they did? They didn't do it for the Guptas. It wasn't because of the Linkway affair. They did it because they had all the municipalities as clients. They had ginormous government tenders. So they did it as a favor. It wasn't a favor to Guptas, it was a favor to Zuma so that they could retain their government appointments. So I feel nothing there. They truly should go out of business, as far as I'm concerned. You look at McKinsey, oh my God. No, we've done nothing wrong. We've just kind of stripped Eskom of $1 billion. But, and again, I was told stories of, I happened to employ that Trillion whistleblower.
Yes.
Who was there when McKinsey and Trillion plotted how they were going to scam on behalf of the Guptas, and the Gupta name featured, scam Eskom, and where they sent in a whole lot of little consultants, youngsters, into sites. And Eskom executives were told on those sites, just find any job for them. It doesn't matter what they do. Just find them something to do, because we've got to justify the 1 billion fee. And I sat again across the CEO for Africa, I think, of McKinsey. And again, he was trying to whitewash the whole affair, except that I brought Bianca into that meeting, and she absolutely lost it, and she started shouting at him and saying, well, I sat at sushi parties where you people discussed this.
Do we ever get a prosecution, I wonder? Let's pause at that point, because we need to talk about prosecutions. We've got a new head of the NPA coming into force. We've got a commercial crimes unit, according to sources who are involved in certainly the investigations into Steinhoff, who say that the capacity of the NPA to investigate corporate crimes is sitting at practically zero. On that in just a moment.